If you use this experience to talk about the kind of physician you hope to become, I think there's room for that here. But again, there's not a lot of reflection. Right. So this is another PS or BS. I am Christine Crispen. I'm one of the MSHQ admissions advisors. Okay. So the student notes when they sent me this statement basically said that they tried sharing a theme to string together their desire to become a physician who embraces uncertainty with his patients. Okay. I personally am never one who likes a theme in general. I feel like it should be organic at best. Certainly not something that you try to make happen. I feel like that becomes trite and contrived, and it just generally doesn't work for me. So I'm not a fan of the theme, and I'm not even sure if that particular theme was even achieved after having read this personal statement. So I would not try to deal with the theme. I would more focus on your personal statement as to why you want to become a doctor. That's what they want to know, the why. So that's where I would start with that. I appreciate that you don't want to focus your YMD with research, and certainly not when you have an MD PhD application. I think it really should just focus on why you want to be a doctor. So, yes, I do agree with that. But I also do not agree that your conclusion should just be one sentence. I don't feel like that's enough to really give the reader enough of a conclusion. So, I appreciate concise, but as you'll note here, you have 1,000 characters to use. So 5,300 characters are provided. I would encourage you to use at least 5,000 of them to write your overall personal statement. So do keep that in mind. All right, so let's get started. So you jump in with this story about Lee and Dr. E. Feel like I was dropped in the middle of something that kind of threw me off for a second. But really, my concern with this particular story is that there's not a lot of reflection here. So you appreciate the willingness to embrace uncertainty with patience, and you talk about a contrast to your own experience. And then you work backwards to that contrast to the experiences you had immigrating to the US. First and foremost, there's a couple of times the language in here you felt belittled, dismissed, there was impatient sighs from the providers. I do encourage you to use a level of caution with this kind of language because the reader is inevitably going to be someone who is a provider, who is in the field, and they may take a little bit of an exception here. So use a level of caution. But more importantly, you talk about seeking care through clinics, you talk about being the translation services with your parents and their providers. So the thing that I would say is, how does that particular story you talk about here being the person doing the translation and stuff like that, how does that shape your goals for becoming a physician? Why was this story included? Why was this story included in terms of how they impact your goals for becoming a physician? If you don't have an answer to that, it may not be the right story to use. Now let's talk about the order. I do like a certain order of the way things go. I probably would start with the second paragraph as I would guess it may be part of your opening goals and opening spark as to why you want to be a doctor. And then I would transition into Lee in this particular experience if that kind of is the flow of the way things go. I just think it's a little out of order for me. Now, moving on. So then you talk about these early memories shaped your college volunteer experience at a Bethesda Community Clinic in rural northern Georgia. Great. First and foremost, why? What is your reflection on these early moments and these early experiences? And if that really shaped your goals for becoming a physician and really starting to explore through this volunteering experience at the community clinic in Georgia, give me some transition and some lead into that. And so now you have the Spanish speaking patient, Antonio, who came with his daughter, Anna. That is fine. And you really talk about being laser focused on them, probably because of your own experiences of feeling dismissed. And you wanted to really make sure that they are heard and all that. And I think that's fantastic. I'm wondering if some of that could be part of your activities, though. in terms of the importance of cultural competence and the importance of making sure a patient is heard and seen no matter what language they're speaking. I feel like some of that might fall better into your activities. However, if the use of this story is part of your reasonings for becoming a doctor, again, I feel like that's what's missing in this particular story. You want to let him know that he was heard, that he's cared for, that you're committed. That's great. Just tell me again, though, focus in on why you want to be a doctor. And that is really what's missing. You haven't talked about that at all so far. And we're about two-thirds of the way through the whole story. So that's a bit of concerning. And then you talk about this experience leaving you eager to explore more. That's great, by the way. I want you to continue exploring. And you talk about this experience at Yale. So then, this experience with Yale, you give this all this detail about this particular disease. Is that what it's called? A disease with this particular patient. So, again, some of this may be better used in the experiences, but then you talk about Gwen and Jan, who are patient and parent with this Norse disease. And so you give a lot of detail about what Jan told you about her daughter and things like that. You talk about these cases being discussed, but you're really working with Jan. And so you talk about the importance of being present and listening. And that's great. And it's particularly as this is your second experience and a later exploratory, if you use this experience to talk about the kind of physician you hope to become, I think there's room for that here. But again, there's not a lot of reflection in this story, why you included it, what the takeaway is, why it impacts your goals to become a physician. All of that is missing for me. And so, if you get the theme of where I'm going with this, I do think you really need to think about how these experiences impacted your reasoning and decisions for becoming a doctor, and certainly transitioning into the kind of doctor you hope to become later. But you haven't really given the reader any indication as to why. And this is not enough of a conclusion. I think it's important to talk about being a doctor who wants to provide culturally competent care and embracing uncertainty and all that. But more importantly, I want to know why you want to become a doctor, full stop. So I do think that's missing. So there's a lot of feedback up here that really is the written version of what I just talked about. Why do you want to be a doctor? What stories have you had that really help solidify your goals for becoming a doctor? The stories that you've included are potentially great ones to use. Just be more reflective and tell me how those stories really shaped your goals for becoming a physician. Now, the thought about a conclusion, I think when you have a conclusion, I personally am of a mindset that a conclusion should be a very brief look back summarizing how your experiences have led you to wanting to become a physician. One, maybe two sentences at most. But more importantly, talk about the forward look that your experiences have given you. And you do a nice job about really alluding to the importance of cultural competence, to really being present with patients and the importance of acknowledging them and being there. And I think that's great. And I think those are the experience that your experiences have really shown you the kind of doctor you hope to become. I'd like to see that as well. But I do think there's a lot more room for more of a conclusion. And again, based on this, you have 1,000 characters. Be more reflective. Let us dig into more about how these experiences have shaped your goals to become a physician. Thank you so much for sharing with me. And hopefully, this will give you an idea of how to reshape and move forward with the rest of your personal statement. Good luck with you.